if I could play that guy, if I could just be crushing people, he's an equal opportunity offender. I stole one of his lines. An actor came up to him and said, Ari, I haven't heard from you in months. You're my agent. What's going on? He goes, I represent talent, not temperature. And you're not fucking hot. So why would I call you? Let's get out of here. And I was like, oh my God. And it used to bother me, to be honest with you, just because I have done 80 movies and worked my whole life. And then when people just see you as Ari, in this country and in the UK, they really get that as an actor, you need to do these rites of passage. You need to work your ass off. And then there are other people that think, okay, it's just a documentary. I just am a lunatic. There was a guy at a party one time who was speaking to me as if I was an agent that could represent him, and I started having an out-of-body experience, like I was on mushrooms. I was like, brother, that I'm not an actual agent. I'm just an actor. Like, he wanted me to represent him. It's like, brother, you can't be this stupid. You can't. You understand the difference between a documentary and a work of fiction.
Well, this is outstanding, the Howie Games Artist Series. This man, a stack of awards in Hollywood, Emmys, Golden Globes, hit shows, 50-plus movies, stand-up comedian. He's beaming in from Adelaide, which I'll be interested in his thoughts in a moment. His name is Jeremy Piven. Jeremy, or as we would call you in Australia, Jezza, welcome to the Howie Games Artist Series. How are you going?
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here. I've never been to Australia, but and I've been wanting to come for a long time, so it's an honor.
What are your initial thoughts and impressions of this beautiful country we're lucky enough to live in?
No, I'm not a fan. I got to be honest with you. The coffee is shit, and the people are. It's awkward. It's just very awkward. No, and I'm not just saying this. It's very interesting. Listen. The reality is, I just got here, but it feels like people are very genuine, and they have people are opinionated and they have good taste. It's very interesting. It's like you can get random people coming up to you for strange reasons, but people have like very specific movies they've seen or whatever, and I really like their taste. And people, like, for instance, the fact that you guys don't have Starbucks here is a testament to you guys, that you just don't want burnt, overpriced, viciously mediocre coffee in this country. And I love that.
And when people are coming up to you on the street, we'll get to your career shortly, but how often do you get the Lloyd call? Like, what's the most? We had Eric Banner on this show, and I know you've been in a movie with him, Black Hawk Down, which I want to talk to you about. And he was in a very famous movie called Chopper, which was an Australian criminal film.
Loved it.
So what do you get the most from everything you've done over 30 or 40 years in the industry? What line?
Let's hug it out, bitch. I get a lot of Lloyd, yeah. So people, they address me as Ari. And what's interesting is that I won the Fresh Face of the Year when I was 37 years old. And I said, there's nothing fresh about my face, but thank you. And I was acting for 30 years before I broke through. And you deal with guys in the sports lane, and the year I broke through is, you're lucky if you are still playing, if you're still active at 37 years old. So every lane is completely different, and for me, I love doing it. And you just have to be just kind of very tenacious. And I just had that belief that if I kept going, a role would open up where I'm allowed to do what I was trained to do.
Yes.
Which I think equates very much with sports. It's just, acting and that lane isn't, in a weird way, as fair as sports. Because one of the cool things that I love about sports is, no matter what happens to you, no matter what anyone's opinion of you is, you do have that chance to right the wrongs, and you have that moment, and that's all I've ever wanted. So with me, it's just about, give me that shot. And I've never phoned it in, taken a dive. um, to a fault where I've taken projects where I thought, wow, the writing's not really there, and it's a first time director, and
Mm.
but I'm gonna do everything I can. I'm gonna try to elevate, and you have to be careful of that because that some a guy in a position of power said to me one time. He said, "You have to stop being the best things in really bad movies." And at first, it's one of those backhanded compliments, but you know, uh, being patient because I love to work, but being patient and finding the right project will serve you. And yet, for me, it's just like sports where the variable is getting your reps in and just doing it, and so that you're ready when you get your shot.
I love how many crossovers there are between the artist series and the sport we've had. I want to ask you about a day you had in Melbourne, but it's funny so I'm privileged enough to be a sports announcer, as you call them, for a sport called cricket and our local football, AFL football. And there's a guy that plays for the team I go for, and his name is Lloyd Meek. And last year he took a mark and then he did something wrong, and I yelled out in commentary, "Lloyd Meek," and my Twitter blew up with Entourage fans who had got the sneaky little bit I put in there. So the
Yeah.
lexicon of that show is worldwide. It really is.
It is worldwide, but I will say, for whatever reason, I really believe it landed in Australia and connected the most.
Really?
Because in the States, when I hear an Australian accent, I know that it's going to be like friendly fire. It's like there's going to be love there. And I'm not just saying that. They really, the national pastime is taking the piss, and that's really what Ari, that's what he's all about. And, I'm this will be disappointing to you and probably all your listeners that I'm not Ari Gold, and I'm a stage actor from Chicago that was thrilled to play this character. But do I spend my time berating people and screaming at them? And I would probably be in prison, or just not
Yes.
allowed to work at this point. You know what I mean? That's the climate that we're in. So but and it used to bother me, to be honest with you, just because I have done 80 movies and worked my whole life and done things that I'm very proud of. And then when people just see you as Ari, that in this country and in the UK, they really get that as an actor, you need to do these rites of passage. You need to work your ass off. You need to go to drama school. You need to come, about it honestly. Um, and then there are other people that think, okay, it's just a documentary. I just am a lunatic, you know. There was a guy at a party one time who was speaking to me as if I was an agent that could represent him, and I it was just I started having an out of body experience, like I was on mushrooms. I was like, brother, that I'm not an actual agent. I'm just an actor. Like, he wanted me to represent him. It's like, brother, you can't be this stupid. You can't. You understand the difference between a documentary and a work of fiction.
I love it. I love it. Melbourne, you were here on the weekend. I was privileged enough to be at the Grand Prix, one of my favourite sports. You were out there on the grid in Melbourne. It was a magnificent day. It was a record crowd. How was your experience at the Australian Grand Prix, Jeremy?
It's amazing. I mean, it's also a testament to you guys. Like, I'm not just saying this. You guys are like, you know how to do it. Um, you can gather in large groups and still be gentlemen. I don't know what it's like once you start, you've had a few drinks, because it probably gets a little sloppy, but people were just, you know, they were just so kind. And um, you know, again, we were, walking down the pit crew, down that pit row, and people were, they were very, very kind. There's nothing but love for me here. I know Lewis Hamilton from the UK. I filmed a show called Mr. Selfridge there for 4 years.
Yes.
And he approached me one time and said, listen, my mother is a really big fan of yours. it made me feel incredibly old, and, it was awkward, but I'm a huge fan of his, and he's, a genius and a legend. His story is incredible, unbelievable, and he's a really, really sweet kid. I say kid, he's 40 years old now, but he would come to the set of Mr. Selfridge and bring his mother, and we would
Yeah.
hang out, and he reminded me of, like, I was lucky enough to talk to Kobe and talk to Michael Jordan because I'm from Chicago, then spent a lot of years in LA, and Kobe especially was very curious, and Lewis Hamilton's very curious, and they just, they're obsessed with getting better, and Kobe would just ask me in the middle of a game, he would come over to me and just ask me, be like, "Man, when I see you playing that role on Entourage, it's so believable. It looks like you're angry, man. Really, how do you do that?" And I said, "Man, how do you pop in a three-pointer with 4 seconds left to go with a billion people watching you? How do you do that?" And he just kind of looked at me, and the whistle blew, and he goes, "No, I get it, I get it." And he flew down court, but he
Wow.
wanted to have a conversation with me in the middle of the game to pick my brain. Um, and it really isn't unlike sports in the way that, like, it's all about reps. It's about just getting in there and just doing it so that it's locked into your muscle memory so that when it's time, you're going to be ready.
So on that sporting analogy, April 2 at the Palais in Melbourne, a wonderful venue. Then April 4 at the State Theatre in Sydney, which is rather posh, by the way, to be playing at the State Theatre. 20 minutes before you go out as a stand-up comedian, mentally, physically, how are you preparing? Are you a bundle of nerves? Are you relaxed? Like, how do you approach going out on stage and having to provide enjoyment for people who are hopefully in the mindset that they want to be entertained and they want to get on board with you?
Yeah. Listen, even if they don't want to get on board with me and they hate me, and or they paid to watch me fail, I welcome them with open arms because uh, we can't define ourselves by how we're perceived, and I think that's a trap. We're only
Mm.
human. I grew up. My parents were my acting teachers, and from the time I was a child, and you can get a little sidetracked with reviews and how you're seen and all that stuff, and as you evolve you realize that it's just like it's not about any of that, and it all comes from you. Um, and the great ones, you look at, again, I apologize because I'm American, so all my sports analogies will be Americans. But you look at Michael Jordan, and he is, and I would never equate myself with him ever, but he is totally calm and present, to the point where he was even closing his eyes and
Mm.
knocking down free throws. And for me, if like Shakespeare says, this is probably the first time anyone's quoted Shakespeare on your show,
Yeah,
but
probably.
the readiness is all. And it's true. The readiness is all. Are you ready?
So when you walk out on that stage, are
Yeah.
you, you mentioned so many films and characters where you play a character. Are you playing the character of a stand-up comedian, or are you just yourself, Jeremy?
That's an existential question that we could spend a lifetime trying to answer. Are we ourselves right now, or are we playing a character? And that is a whole other
I'm me. I'm me.
conversation.
I'm me. I'm curious. I've got a million
Yeah.
questions for you. I'm fascinated by you. So I'm chatting like we would be having a beer in a pub, and I met you, and I'd fire questions at you. So I'm me.
No, well, that's good, and I sense that, and I appreciate it, and that's, by the way, that's why people gravitate towards your show and feel comfortable. I think I'm like you in the way that people come up to me, and once they spend time with me, they want to tell me their life stories, and it's probably the same with you, and it makes you a really great host because they feel comfortable with you. And with me, before I go on stage, it's very interesting. So my journey is as an actor. I got on stage when I was 8 years old, and I've been grinding ever since. I made 40 movies before Entourage. I was ready for my moment. Um, and with stand up, I'm a late bloomer to it. I've only been touring since 2017,
Hmm.
but I'm like, the oldest late bloomer in the game in the way that I started sketch comedy, which is an improv form of comedy with a group in the 90s in Chicago with Chris Farley, back in the day. So I've been doing improvisational comedy and on my feet and rewriting movies and TV stuff and for forever, and so I knew that in 2017 when I started stand up, I knew I needed to do 200 shows a year
Wow.
to get my sea legs, because I realized very quickly, oh, okay, it doesn't matter that I'm totally comfortable on stage and I can make all you guys laugh when we're not on stage. This is a different beast. I have to grind 5 to 8 shows a week every week, and then I will be developing those muscles which can do crowd work, which can really write the jokes and the transitions and all that stuff. So by the time I hit the stage at the Palais Theater on April 2nd, these are really nice transitions, by the way, and they're organic. Or when I reach the State Theater in Sydney, and my boy Volkanovski will be there. I like to name drop, don't worry about it. One of the UFC legends who, when on Pit Row, told me that he's going to be there with his guys, which I can't wait because he's an absolute legend. I'm excited and I have nerves, and nerves are energy. And as any sportsman can tell you, once you realize and identify those nerves, we put an onus on these nerves as if it's negative, and it's just your body's way of waking you up. And it's that great energy that's surging through you, and you breathe, because like anything else, I've bombed on stage, and those nerves can get the best of you. And then you have a choice when you're up there, because your body, you want to get off stage. It's humiliating. No one wants to be humiliated in public. It's terrifying. And so your body's going, get off stage, get off stage. But if you can stay in the pocket and breathe and work your way out of it, I'll never forget the first time I bombed. It was the toughest club. I call it a club. It's a shit bar with 3 people in it, and they're all there to see the DJ. And there are a bunch of comics waiting to go on. And you got a little pin spot and you're on a little wooden crate. And, this is me 3 straight Emmys and Golden Globes into it, standing on stage and I'm not getting anything. And I said, you guys are probably wondering what I'm doing here. And some comic in the back goes, yeah, what the fuck are you doing here, man? And now I'm being heckled by comics. There are 3 people just checking their phones. This is not a good scenario. And so it was my first lesson in, like, okay, it's not going well. How do I dig my way out of this? How can I find the funny in this? And I just started identifying the truth of the situation, which is I'm bombing. I'm being waterboarded. This is pure torture. Admit to it. Okay, well, go deeper with that. Maybe I've never been funny. Maybe I've never been funny in my entire life. So then I started just exploring the idea of never be. And so the more I identified and was self-deprecating, then they started getting on board. I dug my way out, and that was invaluable, because the next time I got on stage, I could tell I was that much better, because it's like, well, I bombed in the worst situation possible. So this is easier. This is going to be much easier. Okay, so it takes all of those moments. So to get back to your question, I'm nervous, I'm excited. It's an honor. These theaters are beautiful. I mean, let's be honest. I'm hitting the ground running. I've never been in this country before, and I'm starting at the best theaters in the country. Who do I think I am? I need to be punished. I mean, it's almost 3,000 people at the Palais Theater. There's only going to be 11 people there, so it's going to be awkward, but we're going to play anyway. You know what I mean?
No, mate.
I'll just do a lot of, do you have any idea who I think I am? Jokes. Can you get that door? Let's go, Lloyd. Chop, chop.
They'll be packed out, mate. They'll be packed out. I like a good name drop. We've been privileged to have Lewis Hamilton and Alex Volkanovski on this show, so I can relate to the gentleman you're speaking about. So there's a couple of name drops for you.
I love it. Well, they're both absolute legends.
Yeah. Oh, what is it? Room service coming, or are they coming to turn down the room? What's happening there?
Listen, I'm hydrating. I wish I was more interesting. I wish I was doing like pure Bolivian cocaine and mushrooms. No. I've got water. I've got coffee. I have a night shoot tonight, so we'll be filming till about 7 a.m. So I'm trying to hydrate.
You're in Adelaide. What, like you're shooting a film at the moment, yeah?
shooting a film, just to the left of me are my lines that I'm just grinding into my head. It's funny because, I wish I had a photographic memory. If I did, it would make things much easier. But I have to just kind of run the lines like a play, and I'll grab anyone. I do lines with my mom. Wait, no, I don't do lines. That would be I run lines. Don't do lines. Don't please.
So with your lines there, I know this
Yes.
hasn't been out. Can you go? Can you roll a couple on me, or is it top secret because it's never been to air, so we can't say any of them?
It's top secret, but
Okay.
like I have this interesting curse where like because I've been able to handle a lot of dialogue and make it feel improvisational, it's like the harder you work, the easier it looks. I would do 4-page monologues in Entourage, and people think that I was making it up, and it was
Yes.
word for word. There was someone on set, literally, and her only job was to make sure that I was word perfect.
Wow.
She would just sit there. So those monologues, and if they weren't word perfect, I'd have to go again, but that's your job. So I just run them, run them until by the time I get to set, it's I'm totally present. You own the lines, and then you can do and perform improvisationally, yet it's word for word, if that makes sense.
The monologue, obviously there was some amazing monologues in Entourage.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Malibu, it's a beach house, and
Yeah.
is it Josh Weinstein, the other agent, and like there's a tracking, like it's cinema, like beautifully shot, and then you're just I don't know how many pages that was, but if you had to say to me one thing from Entourage that I recall, it's how beautiful that shot was and how you just kept going and going and going. Like that's I don't know. I can only say as a punter watching at home, like that was just a wonderful thing to watch. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about or you have pride in that particular moment, but that was your top shelf gear.
Not only do I remember it, but thank you for mentioning that, because that scene was the breakthrough moment for Ari Gold. Because you have to understand that was season 1, episode 7, and I'll never forget it, because the reality is I was hired as kind of an afterthought to Entourage. My character was, I ended up signing a contract because that was not really a series regular contract. It had one scene in the pilot, and I knew Mark Wahlberg, and I knew Ari Emanuel, his agent, and so Ari was my agent. So I knew exactly how to play this guy, and it was very specific. There's a drama turtle E. They're all those people exist. They are Mark's entourage. And I was like, wait a minute. People are going to be fascinated with the backstage life of Hollywood. These are very specific characters. This HBO is the best game in town. They've got The Sopranos and Sex and the City. I got to do this. And so I turned down leads and things to do a tiny role because I knew, okay, this character is fascinating. Ari Emanuel is one of these guys who is a type A, over the top, aggressive, abrasive person who is monogamous with his wife and is a great agent, but you think he's a pig. I'm like, wow, that duality. If I could play that guy, if I could just be crushing people, he's an equal opportunity offender. I stole one of his lines and put it in the show. An actor came up to him and said, Ari, I haven't heard from you in months. You're my agent. What's going on? He goes, I represent talent, not temperature. And you're not fucking hot. So why would I call you? Let's get out of here. And I was like, oh my God, that's fucking brutal. I represent temperature, not talent. And you're not hot. I was like, oh my God, that is crazy. Because the reality is, in sports or in acting, you're not always hot. And if you're hardworking and you got a good work ethic, you got to stick by those people, because it's gonna ebb and flow, you know. So thank you for mentioning that particular shot in Malibu. Was the breakthrough moment for Ari Gold. And it was a steady cam shot. It was an homage to Scorsese and all that stuff. And it's one long, massive monologue where I'm looking for Josh Weinstein, and I keep going through the entire house, and I land, on my mark, and I have to deliver the entire monologue. and all in one take. And, that's what we live for. We live for those moments. And I was ready for that. And that was a breakthrough moment. And that's when they looked at that and went, oh, okay, we have to expand this role. And that's when everything changed. Because
Oh, yeah.
before that, if you look at the show, I would have one scene per episode, and so that was the breakthrough moment. And again, like I said to you, Aussies have good taste. They pinpoint things like that. No Americans ever brought that up. I think I got to go where I'm loved. I think I'm just
Wow.
gonna get a little condo in Adelaide and maybe just open up some sort of a yogurt shop and never to be heard from again.
Oh, you'd love it. Hold that thought about when success comes your way to go back, and we'll circle back to that eventually, and we'll get back to the yogurt shop. You talked about you've got a lot of actors, drama in your family with your folks, and being on the stage from a young age. What's the first thing you can recall that you were on stage doing, and why did it grab you, mate?
My parents threw me up on stage at 8 years old. John Cusack, um, and myself were just kids, and we were both, you know, we would alternate. One night I would do, one night he would do it as children, and we were doing, we were butchering Chekhov at 8 years old, and my parents were in the play, and so the way it was introduced to me is it's just really fun. You get up there and do your thing, and then I was in this troupe with him and various people, a lot of actors that have gone on that you may know, and we were doing really cool, plays and short stories, but we were also improvising, and we were having fun. And their whole motto is "You're enough." When you get up on stage, you're enough, and it gives you a lot of confidence. No matter what you do, don't second guess yourself, don't doubt yourself, because it's very easy to do that. It's very American, I think, to have a lot of that,
Mm.
confidence or maybe false confidence, whatever. But it allowed me to be very present and confident so that I could improvise at a very early age and do, a bunch of just really, cool playwrights. And so I was always doing that, thinking that every kid in the world has parents who have a theater and you get up on stage. I didn't think there was anything different about, and I just kept going. I ended up playing American football in high school. Um, and I was like the only white boy on my football team. And it was like, we had about 4,500 kids at my high school. It was a very big high school, Division 1. And it was very interesting for me because we would get talks saying like, you're going to hear the N word, you're going to experience some racism. And I experienced it from the other side, being the white boy, being on a team with all black guys. And I didn't understand racism. I didn't know what it was, because it just didn't exist. And I had to be taught what it was. So there's something natural about hate. I don't know how I got on that one, but
No,
but anyway, the reality is, you know, at 5'9", 175 pounds, I don't know what that equates to in your numbers. I'm
not
not
much.
playing it.
Not much.
Not much. If you pull up a picture of Lewis Hamilton and myself, there
Yep.
it does exist. We're the same size. So, I'm not playing American football. I could fit into an F1, but I'm not playing American football. So in high school, I was acting, and no one. It was just weird. It was totally under the radar,
So you're an
and
outlier. Being an actor, you're an outlier. You're not one of the cool kids at that stage.
not at all. And so I was always doing it and having a lot of fun, and never. The great thing is, and it's a good thing to remember for people who are young out there or who have kids, like,
Mm.
if you don't put the pressure on someone, like this is a means to an end, and but they're still in it and they have discipline, they love it. It's going to come in the right way, and then you're not going to put pressure on yourself. You're going to have fun. You're going to work hard, and you're going to keep evolving to the point where by the time I went to university at 18 years old, I had already been acting for 10 years. So, I was doing leads as a freshman when it just didn't exist, lead in Shakespeare plays and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't think there was anything special about what I did. But then I got to college and I was like, wait, why is everyone so green? just because I've been doing it forever. And so
Got
you
you.
just keep grinding and you think, okay, this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to blow up. And then you add another 20 years onto that before I even break through with Entourage, and if you're patient enough, you're going to get your shot, but it may be not until much later.
So when you're making your way, was there an actor where you walked onto a set? As you said, you're a professional working actor. Did you have a moment where you walked onto a set and thought, "Holy heck, I can't believe I'm going to be working on screen with this bloke or this girl," where you're like, "Oh my gosh."
I mean, that happens all the time. And I think just like when I was auditioning for Heat with De Niro,
Yeah.
you're sitting out there and you got one scene, and I'm going to play the doctor, and you're just running the scene and you're preparing. 1 hour goes by, 2 hours, 3 hours, and you're just sitting around with a bunch of dudes that look like you, and people start. There was one actor that just snapped. He just cracked. He couldn't take it. It was about 3.5 hours into it, and he just snapped and took the casting assistant and threw him up against the wall, and just started screaming at him. And at that moment, the doors finally opened, and the casting director was there, and he's holding this poor kid, with his feet dangling. That actor has gone on to work, a lot. But that's something that you can't do. And so for me, it's just about, if you stay in it long enough and you don't crack, and
Yep.
you get your chance. And I walked in there and I auditioned, and Mike, the brilliant Michael Mann, like, they really put you through your paces. You got to really do it. And then you get there on the day, and if you hold it together and don't crack, you get to work with Robert De Niro.
And what happens and how do you keep pushing on, Jeremy? We're in Australia, so I'm going to just call you Jezza, because that's what in Australia you'd be Jezza or Pivo. So are you okay
Okay.
with Jezza? Are you all right with
Yeah,
Jezza?
absolutely.
Okay. So Jezza, you're going and you're working, but I'm sure for the successes, there are lots of times where you audition and for whatever reason you don't fit the part. What is it like walking off set when you've no, I haven't got the right term here. When you've tried out for a part, right? When you've done an audition and you get quite a few no's in a row, how do you deal with that in your profession?
Well, I mean, as an actor, you deal with more rejection than people do in multiple lifetimes. That's just a
Exactly.
reality of the game. You just you put everything you have into it. Each audition has to be a performance where you're totally off book and you just go in there and crush it. And I remember one time auditioning, and it was for this new doctor show, and it was a comedy hybrid, blah blah blah. And I did my thing, and they were all laughing. I was like, I got this. And then I heard that I didn't get it, and I remember I said to my agent, "What's the feedback?" And she goes, "The feedback is you didn't get it. That's all you need to know." And I was like, okay, but man, I was like, man, I thought I hit it. I got lucky, and they were laughing, and I bet it's because they're looking for pretty boys. And I was funny, but that they just want to. And she goes, "You have to stop making excuses. That's what you have to do. All right. You got to get after it." And I was like, "All right, I will. But for me, just get some feedback on this one." And she came back to me and she goes, "You're right. They were looking for pretty boys. You were the funniest that they saw. And they're just going for pretty boys." And they went for a group of pretty boys, and the show wasn't funny, and it got canceled, and fuck them. I'm a little bitter. I'm not going to be. Look, I'm bitter. I'm bitter, but that bitterness serves me.
I've got and I didn't want to say that at the start because you never with your guests you want to respect them, but not be gushy. But I have two favorite television shows, and one is Entourage and the other is Seinfeld. And from what I can gather, you're the only actor that has been in both those shows. 1993, you're in Seinfeld. I was watching it. You had a rude haircut because they were trying to make a pilot, and you were cast in there to play George, right? Did you have, like, you're a reasonably young man at this stage. Did you have any idea of the size and scope of what that show was?
I had never seen Seinfeld
You hadn't
because
seen it.
I'd never seen it because you have to understand, I was a stage actor from Chicago. I was in LA doing my first TV show. I was a series regular on the Larry Sanders Show,
Yep.
which, is a legendary show. Um, Shandling and Seinfeld were very good friends, and voted that number one or number two show of the '90s. People really love that show. I was playing the head writer on that show, and still had that kind of journeyman actor mentality where I was living in a pool house, like a pool boy, even though I was on a series. So I just didn't, I just kept, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was, in the parking lot, and Mark Hirschfeld, who cast Seinfeld, said, "Hey, Jeremy, would you like to audition for Seinfeld?" And I'd never seen the show, and I was like, as an actor, like, "Yeah, of course." Never saw it, and he goes, "Well, it's to play George." A fictional version of George. I have no idea what she's talking about. I've never seen the show, and so I had worked with Jason Alexander, and so I'd been around him. So I went in and auditioned and did an impersonation of him, having never seen the show. And they were like, "Oh my God, man, you must be such a big fan of the show." And I was like, "Yes, I am." I'd never seen it. And listen, it benefited me because I was on set with them, and they were the Beatles, but I didn't know it. And Jerry was, just they were all just really cool and fun and funny, and I had a great time. Had I really, watched the show and known about the impact of it, it would have changed how maybe the interaction or whatever. But I just had a great time with them. What's funny is before I started my stand-up journey, um, I was in Malibu looking at this Porsche, and I hear, "Get away from that car, you Jew." And I look up and it's Seinfeld, and being Jewish and him being Jewish, you
Yes.
can do that.
Yes.
And so I went up there, and he was sitting with the great Sebastian Maniscalco, who's one of the great comics, and Spike, a guy that does his podcast, or his directs Coffee and Cars with comics and all that stuff. And I just sat with them, and he said, "What are you doing?" And at the time I was shooting Mr. Selfridge. I said, "I'm doing a period drama in London." And he said, "Why would you do that? That sounds awful." He just thought it was like the worst idea, because he loves stand-up. And he's someone who's a great example of how powerful it is to knowing your limitations. He knows he's not a brilliant actor. Larry David is a genius. He
Yep.
wrote Seinfeld. So he's a stand-up comic, surrounded himself with brilliant actors, and Larry David wrote this incredible sitcom, and he hung in there. He's honest, that he's not some trained brilliant actor. He's a genius stand-up and a great writer. And so after that, that's he didn't chase something else in that space. He just continued. He's a brilliant, prolific stand-up comic, and I didn't understand what he was talking about. But now, as a stand-up, now I realize, my God, it's so freeing because you write all your own material. You live or die by everything you're doing. You're on that microphone in front of those people, and it's all on you. And you don't have to rely on anyone else. And it's really kind of amazing and thrilling and gratifying. So now I finally get what he was talking about.
Back to working hard and then getting your break. At what stage of the 8 series in was there a moment when you're out and about, or you get sent the ratings or the advertising rates or whatever it is, Jez, where you understand that Entourage is that moment and that opportunity?
It's interesting because we were just before social media exploded, just before TiVo even really existed. So in the beginning, I remember people were like, "Hey, can we come over and watch it on Sunday nights?" And I was like, "Wow, you want to watch my?" It's like people weren't really that interested in the shows I was doing before that. I was like, this is interesting. And people would all gather on a Sunday night to watch. And I just kind of looked around. So it was very organic the way it happened. I was like, oh, maybe we're on to something here. Um, and yeah, I think it's gone on to have this other life. I think there's this whole generation of kids that watch it during the pandemic. So I've got,
Absolutely.
22-year-old kids coming up to me and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. HBO doesn't even realize, I'm on tour and people are screaming out lines from the show. They miss it. There's not a lot of content out there that people are connecting with. And that's why you see people rebooting. But this is one of those shows where like people would be excited for a reboot because they miss it. It struck a chord with people. So I can't tell you, I was lucky enough to win a bunch of awards. I was never that guy before. And so the work was being recognized. That was incredible. And so that to me, I could feel the change.
So then, how do you approach the change in life to not become what we would call a dickhead here in Australia? You're a hardworking actor that's been in all these wonderful shows, and then, as you said, your moment came, and then all of a sudden you are everything that Hollywood is. From what I would understand, you're getting paid a lot of money, you're recognisable on the street. I'm sure you're going to the best restaurants, and living the life. What's the transition like from a hardworking dude to a genuine star, a worldwide star? And how'd you handle it, mate?
Well, just hearing you say that is not the way I think or see it or saw it. Um,
Well, maybe
I,
that's
you
credit
know,
to you. Maybe that's why you didn't become a knob.
well, thank you. I just think it's one of those things where it's like, um, with athletes, I don't know how they do it because they're still kids when they blow up.
Yeah.
They're not even, men and they've been sheltered. They probably haven't heard no since they were 13.
Hmm.
I think it's a lot tougher for them. I was a 37-year-old man, these guys would be retiring when I broke through. So for me, I it was really nice. Anyone who says that they wouldn't want their hard work recognized is lying. They're lying. I don't, they don't care about, certain things. But yeah, to have it recognized is special because I, you know, I think one of the reasons why we follow and are enamored with athletes or actors is because the reality is you have to sacrifice large portions of your life to be good at it. And not
Hmm.
everyone's willing to do that. And as we see more and more that, yes, of course, talent is a variable, but grinding and putting the hours in is where it's at. And so, not everyone wants to do that. And I'm not even saying who's right or wrong. You know, I'm 200 years old and still single and have dedicated my life. People are like, why are you still single? And I say, I'm married to my work. And then my work decided to see other people. Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. That is the type of hilarity that you can expect from me at the Palais and the State Theater.
That's what we're coming to see. You mentioned rebooting the show. The world has changed, in some ways for good. I can't comment on American culture because I don't live there, but in Australia, from my perspective, working in the media, you have to be so careful of what you say, which is good for many reasons, but I think we've probably overdone it in this part of the world. We've probably become over-sanitized, over-critical, um, overly woke, for want of a better term. Do you see, it's the question you get asked in every interview, so I might as well ask it to you because it's what people want to know. Do you see Entourage potentially ever coming back? I love the podcast with Doug that he does with the guys. I've really enjoyed that, and it seems to come up every second episode. But in your world, when you've been Michael Jordan playing with the Chicago Bulls, the top of the tree, can you see yourself going back to that, or do you move on as an actor and as a person?
So we always move on. I've been putting together a movie for almost 14 years now. I bought the rights to this Arthur Miller short story, and just getting the money, for a period piece that's independent I was so I had never produced something before, so I grinded and stayed after it, and I play a tap dancer, and so every year that I heard no, I got better at tap. So then I put over a decade into tap, so it's like an interesting metaphor for like, if you keep shutting me out, I'm just going to get stronger until we finally found the money, made the film. We're going to be going and showing it at the Miami Film Festival on April 11th. We got this brilliant review in Variety, which is very, very difficult. 10 minutes.
Congratulations, mate.
Thank you,
Congratulations.
man.
After 14 years, that's quite an achievement.
It is, and it's the best work of my life. And that's,
Well, well done.
we're very lucky as actors. You know, legends of the sport, they have to retire unless you're Mike Tyson. And then you can just take mushrooms and fight children for some reason, which is an interesting choice. But but with us, we get to just keep going, and you don't really retire. So I have moved on, but at the same time, like, I really do see how much of an impact we have with people and how much they miss us. And yeah, with this, we're living in times where people are putting a lot of energy into performative gestures, trying to be seen in a certain way, ticking all the right boxes, and they're forgetting that people need to laugh. And we've been locked up.
Yeah.
And we need a good laugh. And so for me, not to be too dramatic, I feel like I'm providing a little bit of a service. When you come out and see me next week, it's my honor to make you guys laugh and forget about everything that you've been dealing with. I'm very grateful for that. And the more I can make you laugh, the better. And I'm going to give the people what they want. I know they want to see Entourage, but I also want to show them who I am. So I weave it in a very clever way in terms of like letting you know that I do run lines with my mom. Everything I've said is Ari Gold, I've said to her face. And then I launch into a massive monologue where it's the most offensive thing you've ever seen ever. And I'm doing it in my mom's face. You know what I mean? I can't do it for you right now. You're gonna have to come to the Palais or the State Theater. There you go. But that's selfishly my way of saying, hey, I come from a good family of artists. You may think of me, you're going to leave going, I think I understand a little bit of who Jeremy is, as opposed to, those that go, oh, he's Ari Gold. He's an agent that's a douchebag, reactive, type A, rich, and all of these preconceived notions, because we don't listen. This is a long form. I love long form interviews because you get a sense of who someone is as opposed to a soundbite.
Yes.
Or going, oh yeah, I know who he is. He's that guy, and so, you talk about, can I go back? It's not even going back. It's more like, just kind of, it's something that it would be an honor because we really struck a chord. It was very specific. People love watching it. It's a world that if we were to navigate it now, I think it'd be very a fertile ground to explore what a guy like Ari, how he would navigate the woke culture. Lloyd could be his politically correct consultant. Ari, you can't say that. It's where you're not a friend to the gay community. I am a friend of the gay community, and you're using the wrong pronouns. What do you mean by that? What is that? You got to use the right pronouns.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, your pronoun is has and been, because you're a fucking has been. I mean, like, who knows? Like, it could just be, and he could get canceled. I mean, who knows? It could be very fun. Then he could be off the grid. Then they have to go get him and bring him back. I mean, there's so many fun possibilities to explore.
I reckon you've already got the script in your head. We always do what we call a player profile, Jeremy. So first thing that pops in your head, I'm going to ask you a series of short, sharp questions, and I'm going to ask you one final question that I'm going to get out of your hair. And I've loved having a chat with you. Okay, nicknames.
For me personally, my first nickname was Fresh. Believe it or not. And as a white boy, being called Fresh was weird. My parents called me Jem. Everyone British or from Australia calls me Jezza. Jezza. There we go.
Jezza it is. All right, Jezza, what's your favorite food?
It used to be sushi till I got mercury poisoning.
Oh,
Yeah, that was brutal.
what if someone was coming around to your place and you were trying to impress them? What are you cooking? What's your number one dish?
Man, I really wish I had skills.
Well, you got
Um,
nothing. Not even like peanut butter toast. Nothing.
it, any chef, if I would tell them that I could, listen, I can grill up a nice steak.
Okay.
I can not screw it up. Um, but let's leave it at that.
Okay. Steak on the barbie is perfect in this part of the world. So three people are now coming to this steak barbecue of yours that you've met, that you haven't met, alive, dead, that you'd like to have to dinner. Anyone from historical perspective, anyone around today? Who are the three people that are coming around to your place for a steak?
It's a great question.
Finally, I've asked a good one. 50 minutes in, I've finally asked you a good
Yes.
question.
I would say Robin Williams. We got
Oh,
to get
yeah.
Robin Williams there because he's one of those hybrids. He went to Juilliard, proper acting school, and is a legendary comic. So it'd be great to mix it up with him. I think Marlon Brando and Michael Jordan.
Wow, that is a good three. I've had some good answers. That's a good three. What was the first thing, Jezza, you ever did that you got paid for? First job, like a paper round or washing someone's car? What was your first ever job?
Uh, my first job was I was working in a pizza parlor, and my boss was a vertically challenged gentleman, or used to be called a midget. And this particular midget, a vertically challenged small person, I don't know what the right way to, he was screaming at me, and I couldn't stop laughing, and I was crying. I was laughing so hard, and I got fired.
So that one
I
didn't last long.
It didn't last long. It did not last long. And he was just screaming that I need to straighten up and fly right as I left. And I've been acting ever since.
Ever since. So that was your first job. What was your first ever car? What was the first thing you drove?
Oh my God.
Come on.
16 years old. It was one of those old school 1977 Ford Chrysler that, like, it was pretty beat up, and it was a disaster. But the first car I ever bought
Yeah.
was an old school 1965 Mustang. Once I
Oh,
got the money, I got that. Yeah.
yeah. What color?
Uh, Believe it or not, I grew up in a green one, and that was the color. But this one was red. It was a bit
Oh,
much.
you got to get a red one. What? Oh, and see, this is a difficult one to ask to actors, but I'll ask it anyway. Well, firstly, when you came home from school, and these will be different shows, when you came home from school when you weren't acting or doing whatever you're doing, you turned on the telly, what were you watching?
I was watching cartoons, and I remember I came home, and the couch, we were robbed. The couch was gone,
Oh.
everything was gone, and I ran out to my mom. I said, we've been robbed. And she said, no, 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 we use our furniture for the set. So we're an acting family. And my we were doing like a Chekhov play, and I was like, why can't we just be normal people? I want to watch cartoons. Stop acting. Stupid.
So that's what you were watching. You're watching cartoons. A long
Yeah.
flight to Australia. What are you currently watching at the moment on a streaming service, or what's keeping you entertained?
I like this new show, Shogun. Have you seen Shogun?
I've seen the first part of it. It's good, yeah. I enjoyed it.
Really, it's really good. It's really well made, and I've definitely been hooked on that one.
One movie that I should watch from your recommendation. Could be a famous one, it could be an art house one. Just give me a movie to watch. You can be in it if you want to.
No, I can't be that guy. But when people say to me, like, what's a movie you're proud of that we haven't seen, I would say either Smoking Aces or Very Bad Things, which are very, very dark, twisted, dark comedies that I did that I'm proud of. Um, but it's funny you mentioned Eric Bana
Yeah.
earlier, because I did Black Hawk Down with him.
Yeah.
And we at that point didn't have a reference for him. After that, went and watched the Chopper and all that stuff, and
Chopper.
he's a legend. But he's one of these guys where I hope to run into him out here at some point, because I feel like, as I've grown, we have a lot in common in the way that I know that he was one of these kind of comedic sketch
Yes.
actors and also a really great dramatic actor. So we gotta get him out to the Palais, or I don't know if he lives in Melbourne or Sydney.
Mate, he lives 10 minutes from the Palais, and I hate to tell you this, but he was at the Grand Prix on Sunday.
I missed him. We gotta get it. We gotta get him to the show. We gotta catch up because also Black Hawk Down was very surreal. We were in Rabat, Morocco,
Yeah.
just 75 actors with really bad haircuts, and it was very surreal. And I was the cover set, which means as soon as it rains, they go to me. Well, guess what? It doesn't rain in Morocco. So every day it said cover set, and my line was, I can't see shit here. So every day there was a typo for some reason. It said, I can't see shit here. And so I had to stay there and wait for it to possibly rain. Anyway, it's all good.
Walcott, one of my favorite films. Favorite holiday destination? You're going on holidays, where are you going?
No, it's close to you guys. Believe it or
Yep.
not, I love Bali.
Oh,
I know
yeah,
you're
nice.
probably sick of it, but it's stunning there.
Yeah. Bucket list destination. Haven't been, but love to go.
I've been lucky to go to India and Japan. I've been all over the world, with various things. Where it's funny, but the one place that I hadn't been was Australia, and here I am living the dream. And after I'm done talking to you, I have a night shoot, so I think I might have a complete nervous breakdown at some point because now I'm working days and nights.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if you
yeah.
hear like, coming up next, actor Jeremy Piven was crying like a grandmother on set. He apparently has a drug problem. Just know that I'm sleep deprived.
You haven't slept. Well, I got to let you go. Best sporting event you've been to, Jezza?
Wow, that's a great question. I've been so lucky to see I'm such a huge fan of all sports.
Yeah.
And growing up in Chicago as a kid, I got to see Michael Jordan play live, which was just unbelievable. And then I started kind of becoming known a little bit as an actor, and they let me. It would be like I would be doing a stage play or whatever, and I would come in a little bit late and just to see the game, and they would, because I'm a Chicago guy, they would let me in, and they said, "Listen, we're going to let you sit with the press, but you can't cheer." And I'm like, "Okay." So I defy you to be a Chicago kid
Yeah.
watching Michael Jordan rip the rim down and not cheer. So I ended up cheering, and then they escorted me out, and I got thrown out of the
I love it.
United Center while watching Michael Jordan play.
Two more questions for you, but this is the most important one I have for you. This defines you as an actor, as a good bloke, as Jezza, as an American abroad. This is the one, and it's bizarre, but try and look me in the eye when you answer this, even though we're down Zoom. Jeremy Piven, pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
That seems like a huge faux pas. I don't know. That it feels like a celebrated mistake that should have never happened.
So
I
you're a
don't know.
no.
I would say no. No pineapple on pizza. No.
Peanut butter, crunchy or smooth?
I would say crunchy.
Good man. Well, you're back in business. Final question I have for you. Mate, we always finish this way, and it's been a privilege to chat with you. You need to go and see Jezza in Melbourne, April 2, or in Sydney, April 4. The links are in the show notes, so you can go and see this man. Hopefully on front row, because I'd love to see him in action. We are privileged to have a lot of kids and young adults listen to this show, Jeremy, and they may be on the way to acting class or cricket training or the science fair or want to become a plumber or a lawyer. You've had a lot of success in your career, and you've explained that you were far from just exploding on the scene. It took you a long time. What advice would you give to those young inquiring minds that want to achieve some success in the field that they love and passionate about? And you're obviously very passionate about what you do, mate.
Yeah, I would say we're living in times where people compare themselves to other people a lot. And I just feel like if you cannot do that, if you cannot be affected by anything that people say, any, negative stuff really impacts people. If you have a passion for something, stay after it. Don't put any pressure on yourself. Stay with it. Something's going to come of it. And the only way you can go wrong is if you let your inner life be affected by the outer world. Just kind of just turn the volume down on all that and stay after it.
Mate, I love it. I appreciate your time. Good luck with the stand-up. Not that you need it.
Yeah.
Continue on.
Listen, come to my show. If you want to heckle, whatever, just let it fly. But just know that don't bring a butter knife to a tank fight because I will destroy you. I'm a professional.
I'm not a heckler, mate. I'm about spreading the love, mate. Thanks for joining me on the Howie Games. Enjoy Adelaide, get some sleep, and travel well. And it was an absolute privilege to have a chat with you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Howie. I appreciate it, man. Take care, buddy.